Okay, I think we can start. Hello, welcome in Krytyka Polityczna. My name is Agnieszka Wiśniewska. I'm a chief editor of Krytyka Polityczna. As you can hear today, we're gonna speak English. There is a translation if you need. There are headphones outside. This meeting will be also streamed online, and we also have the translation from English to Polish, from Polish to Polish Sign Language. That's why we have so many cables and equipment here. But I'm really happy that the other people also who are not here today in Krytyka Polityczna in Warsaw can participate and can hear our discussion. Welcome our guests. Some of them you already know very well, some of them maybe less, so I will introduce. I will start from Sławomir Sierakowski, sociologist, political commentator, as well as head of Krytyka Polityczna and co-author of the book you may know, Społeczeństwo, populistów, Society of Populists. Przemysław Sadura, co-author of this amazing book, and the professor at the sociology department at Warsaw University, and also the coordinator in our institute, in Krytyka Polityczna, our research institute. Szelényi, did I pronounce it well? Foreign policy specialist, former politician, our special guest from Hungary, and author and founding director of the CEU Democracy Institute Leadership Academy. And Georgi Kasyanov, sorry for my not very well pronunciation, the professor of history. The professor of history, former head of Department of Modern History and Politics at the Institute of History of Ukraine, of the National Academy of Science of Ukraine. We're gonna talk today about the populism, about the society, and about the elections. Because this year, maybe you followed, I can hear myself twice. Because this year, the 2024, was the year of election. Like almost 60 countries had an election. In Poland, we had two elections, European Parliament, local election. Right now, we follow the election in US, last week in Romania, and we're gonna also follow this election. So many people voted this year in election, but does it mean that democracy is in a great shape if so many people can vote? This is the question we will gonna ask today. And we will gonna also think on this, how the topics also that are described in the Society of Populists, the idea that Sławek and Przemek introduced in their books, how the populists change the society changed the populists, how it looks in a bigger picture in the whole world. That's why I wanted to start from Sławek and Przemek to, could you remind us, you published this book last year, could you remind us briefly what it means, society of populists? Why you focused on society? Because all of the books about populism were focused on Orban, Kaczyński, Trump. And you decided to do something completely different.
Okay. But yeah, that's true. That when we are thinking about the problem of populism, we often use the perspective of leadership. You know, we've got good societies, good citizens that are manipulated by bad guys, wrongdoers, who the guys who try to manipulate people, divide society, burn the social conflicts. They take out gifts for political supporters. That's the main story, and we would like to reverse this perspective. I mean, what if the problem is that people want to be manipulated. What if some of them are cynical and ready to support those wrongdoers because of just individual interests? And what if all political parties have to be less or more populist in this time? And why people, want to be manipulated? I will give you an example from our research, because we have done a lot of surveys, a lot of research, for instance, on people's attitudes toward welfare state, toward state in Poland, and we saw that Polish society is more and more interested with a strong state, with welfare state. After our accession to European Union, a lot of people went to other countries. They went into the labor markets, and they saw that Western state is strong, administration is very efficient. There are still welfare state institutions in all those countries. I mean, in Germany, in UK, especially in Scandinavian countries. And they like to get the same institution in Poland. But our society has very low level of social capital. And this social capital is trust to other people, it's trust to public institutions, to the state. When we don't trust each other, and it's really very low. If we ask the question if in general people mostly can be trusted, it's like 60–70% of Scandinavian societies that support such statement. European Union average is about 30–40%, and in Poland it's 12, maybe 15%. So very low trust to each other, to public institutions. So, the situation is that we cannot have Scandinavian welfare state with Polish taxation. I mean, they are low, and you cannot reform public institutions with such budget. But you don't trust the state, so you want the Scandinavian welfare state.
But you don't want to pay taxes.
Yeah, you won't pay a penny because you don't trust that state will deliver the welfare state. So, if there are two parties, one promises that we will start with new taxation, but we will give you good quality education. We will raise the health contributions, but we will shorten the queues to the doctor, etc., etc. And you've got another party that will say, we will make Poland great again. We will rebuild the state without new taxation. What's more, we will give you at the beginning 500 Polish złotych for each child monthly. So you got the party of reform and party of money. Which one will you choose? It's not no-brainer. And it's exactly what the Law and Justice did. They started with very good diagnosis of problems after the transformation. They started the program 500 plus, And it was the biggest social transfer since 1989. And they were able to to get support from the fanatic followers, and they built a new electorate of cynical voters who don't accept the ideology, don't like the leaders actually. They knew that this party is not a good for public good, but they were ready to support it because of individual interest, because this lack of trust to state and public institutions. That's the this reverse perspective. When you look at the society and then look what the society, what is the influence of this populist society on political leaders.
Do you want to add something?
Because, I mean, for 20 years there were many books published and mostly focused on leaders. And usually the conclusions were quite superficial. Because if you put in the same basket Erdogan, Trump, Kaczynski, and so on, what you can get out of it is pretty much that they use propaganda, that they put nation above the law, that they use Vergangenheitspolitik, so like the politics of history, and of course they are attacking minorities and dividing society, organizing conflicts, etc., etc. But this you can get without reading a book. I mean, we published several books about populism, like Jan Werner Miller's book, which is kind of a introduction, because it's a thin book, enumerating several practices of populism. So for us, this was like pretty much not enough, because it doesn't explain pretty much anything. I mean, another book was by John Stanley about fascism. I mean, they are worth reading because there are a lot of interesting facts, comparisons, etc., etc. Usually they are presenting also populism from Eastern Europe to the broader public in the West, so you have to be a little bit superficial about it. But our idea was I mean, for us the problem was like, for example, okay, we have populism pretty much everywhere, but why it goes so far in destroying public institutions in Eastern Europe and not necessarily in Western Europe? Even more, why in Eastern Europe a populist head of the state is kind of a standard here, whereas in the West it's only Giorgia Meloni who reached this level. Of course you have populist parties in coalitions, or they can have like 20%, they can even win elections, but usually they don't rule. And then if they rule, still the so-called deep state is usually stronger than leaders. This is why Trump hates deep state so much, because the deep state blocked him. I mean, we even choose quite radical example when there was first decision of Trump to ban immigration from 7 Muslim countries. I mean, Trump first, his first term, and it was immediately overturned by the local court in Seattle. And you remember all what happened when Constitutional Court decided that this decision of the government or the other decision of the government is unconstitutional. Bluntly, the government decided not to print it and done. And pretty much was, I mean, de facto accepted, because it didn't cause any social revolution here. Some protests, yes, but not really, like the social anger was still pretty much limited. So what we thought is that it makes sense to distinguish between regions or different political cultures with different background, different history, different economic history, different even religion, which is also a usually overlooked factor, but it's important. So we found out that there are 2 or 3 factors that makes populism very different in Eastern Europe than in the West, which was something that Przemek already touched. The level of trust, very different in Eastern Europe and the Western Europe. So this party of reform would have much lower chance to be elected over the party of cash, because if you don't trust the state, you don't trust that the reform will be delivered, simple as it is. The second factor is the very different or much weaker tradition of political liberalism here. And not only that, we also asked the question why, and we realized by reading the speeches of the leaders, formal or informal leaders of Polish society, that usually independence was the factor or was the aim that that made all other discussions irrelevant. Like political leaders in Poland used to say, we're not going to discuss now whether it should be liberal or not. We are fighting for all Poland, for entire Poland, for everybody. Independence first, the rest is just a waste of time or waste of energy. And we are quoting it, choosing different times, but usually the motive was the same. And then the third factor that quite rarely we discuss with the public, because it's a little bit more sophisticated, was this postmodern turn. And when we are talking about cynical voters, you may ask, what's actually surprising? Maybe it's just the political pragmatism of voters. The pragmatism would be like, you're thinking like what party can be less evil, or like you can disagree partly, but still you decide to vote. Not everybody liked Freedom Union in 90s, but still some people voted for it. Same with post-communist party, etc., etc. But if the difference between what you think about the party and the fact that you vote for it is so huge, like in case of Kaczyński party, for example, then it's not anymore about pragmatism. Whoever lives in Poland in last 8-9 years probably remembers that whenever a newspaper used to check Polish opinion about what's going on in the Constitutional Court, what do you think about the public TV, what do you think about the Catholic Church, etc., always the majority was very critical. Usually 20% voters would support what PiS was doing in concrete issues. But then at the ballot, PiS used to get like 40%. So there was this strange difference, which was about 10 to 20% of people who actually disagree with pretty much everything, and they still vote for PiS. And then comes geography. The move that was really quite a revolutionary move that Kaczyński made between his first term, 2005-2007, and his second, because he was actually the leader after 2015, was that before PiS party was pretty much similar to a civic platform. I'm not talking about the program, although program was also quite similar. I'm talking about the social profile. Same voters, like same percentage of big cities, small cities, educated, not educated, females, males, earning more, earning less. And then Kaczyński realized that, migrating to province would give him hegemony. Why? Because in province, the tradition of political liberalism is the weakest. People don't usually walk around constitutional court. They don't have so much access to media. If, in smaller places, you cannot even buy the newspaper anymore in kiosk. And in the same time, social needs are the most important. So expelling elites first from the party, Radek Sikorski, Paweł Kowal, Kazimierz Michał Jazdowski, and many, many others, radicalizing language, simplifying and even making it quite primitive, in expelling elites from the electorate and fully moving to province would help him to hegemonize the public sphere, because exactly these two factors: lowest trust, lowest social capital, lowest tradition of political, lowest understanding of it, and in the same time strongest social needs, especially before. Now, of course, many things happen that it's a little bit different now. But the third factor is interesting, the cynicism, because if you remember books from 80s, anybody who studies humanities, like Peter Sloterdijk, this critic of cynical reason, or Risikogesellschaft by Ulrich Beck, and many, many other books, they were criticizing elites for becoming cynical because they, the Washington consensus, neoliberalism, all of it actually made a huge difference between losers and winners. In case of Poland, of transition, but in case of other countries, of this like neoliberal revolution, right? So what we found out is that this cynicism actually trickled down. So like, when society was hearing constantly for years and even decades that, well, invisible hand of market will, at one day will help everybody, but it actually was never happening. Then people became a little bit cynical. So like if politicians used to have cynical attitudes to electorate, now electorate started to choose parties that can be useful, that can, or they can actually that they can actually benefit in a very like blunt way, even brash way. So this was something that actually reversed our perspective. We wanted to, and also don't forget, we wanted also to understand like how 8 years of populism changed us. Pretty much nobody asked this question, and it happened that not only it radicalized the right side, but it radicalized our side. And the research that we did after, for the anniversary, 1 year anniversary of the government, we realized that, for example, society is much more permissive to corruption, or that a civic coalition that is ruling the country had like much more fanatical base, using much more radical language, this Silni Razem, as you remember, or other groups. So there are many changes going on inside, below, and usually, and this is my last point, usually we only see in TV these fanatical voters, because they are much more visible, much more, they cause much more conflicts. But what really makes difference is how behave the cynical base. But it's for probably longer discussion.
We started from Poland, but in Poland, when we talked like even years ago about the populism, always the discussion started from Orban and Hungary, as in like the inspiration. So when you think, thank you, Zsuzsa, from your perspective as a politician, as also the person who works in Central Europe and the person who knows Hungarian politics very well, how do you see this perspective on how the populism changed the society? How the Orban politics, how this, all of the years with Orban, how it changed the Hungarian society? Is it changed or maybe not?
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me, and I'm super happy to be here. I always very much like to talk to and with Polish people. Because we are, Polak, Węgier, dwa bratanki, and this is a very strong feeling in Hungarians. So I have it from my childhood. A couple of years ago, before 2015, I came to Warsaw for a conference or something. And this was before PIS victory, right? It was still probably Kwasniewski, the president. And I remember someone asking for you, oh, Zsuzsa, we thought Hungarians are decent people. This is how we remember you. And then what the hell happened to you? And this was really, hit my heart that we are not looked as decent people any longer because Hungary is led by Orban and people are voting for him. So I was in politics all those years, and opposition, of course, and every effort, 100% or 120 intellectual effort, we tried to talk to the people and understand how they think. And of course, the people is not anything like this because people are very diverse. But it's no question that 50% of Hungarians voted for Orban for a long time. And I understood during those years that we really have to think about politics in a different way. And maybe this is one of my first reaction to how you introduced your work and the research. First of all, people are not political animals. So majority of the society is not dealing with politics at all. And I learned this when I started to speak to my hairdressers, who are very typical middle-class Budapest women, and none of them ever thinks about political terms, but they all go for voting. So they are not those who are out of society, they are voters, but they just don't deal with politics. They deal with everything except politics. So I started to talk to them on politics. I've had to find a few ones, not too many, who were interested. But I also made a lot of exercise to explain them what am I doing and what I think about and what are happening in the world. Because those terms that I was using was just completely uninteresting and not comprehensible for them. So this, when we speak about, you have to speak simpler, and stories and narratives. This is the job of a politician, because people are not political animals like us. So this is a number one thing what I learned. I really started to respect the voters as such. I actually don't believe in the cynical voter. I really question this. I think people are actually pretty normal and rational people, okay. But, well, okay, we can discuss this at some point. What I want to say is that they are just very different from us in terms of their interest and what they are spending their daily life. Now, so I think what we learned in the last 10, 15 years is politics not an intellectual thing any longer. Maybe this was a complete misunderstanding in the 1990s from our side, that because intellectuals made the Eastern European revolutions, just like communism was also done and created by communists, and of course it looked not so nice when it was for everyone. So maybe democracy also went through a certain change of perspective that, how we deal with people and what politics is about, and when you really have to exercise democracy and involve everyone and talk to everyone, then it requires a change from our side. And many of those populists are actually learned this earlier than us. They realized that people are not political animals, and of course, and they took a different agency. And of course, I think when we talk about populism, is not only people talking in simple language, but of course, it's either an ideology or it's a political strategy. It has always an aim to somewhat manipulate people or just get their interest and votes. And just recreate a political discourse for their advantage. And the problem, of course, is not with this, but of course, polarizing language, started to think about zero-sum games, enemies and friends, and of course, when they get to power, that they change the rules of the games of democracy and they become autocrats. So because I deal with Hungary most of the case, I prefer to use these new autocrats, because this is what we are actually facing. I think we are more beyond the classic populist discourse, because the problem is that they actually change the games of the rules. And I think this is also what happened in Poland, not at that scale, but in Hungary, but basically de-democratization, institutional de-democratization process started, which I call like autocratization. So and I would like to say one other thing, of course it's a fascinating topic, because I'm originally a psychologist, and I always try to put everything into a different frame than the political science. And another thing what I understood, that actually populists can serve certain purposes. And this is related to how the world has changed and that we are facing so many insecurities. And I also learned that most societies in the world, or most of the countries, are actually unstable societies. Very few societies are like our the best Western models to which we always try to compare ourselves. But actually, most of the societies are insecure. What does this mean? This is societies which are characterized by very low trust, which you refer to. Low level of trust is a problem. But it's also a kind of preference to short-termism versus long-termism. We don't invest in the longer process. Why? Because we just don't trust that things will change to the worse. Because this is our historic and cultural experience. This is how a society we lived in from generation to generation. In every generation, and just think about your own family. It's in my family, it's completely clear. It's my parents lived in a completely different world, and my grandparents also lived in the completely different world with different rules, and nothing has changed because they wanted them to change. It happened to them. So there were so many changes just in our own history, and this is exactly Central Europe, and this is not only the last 2-3 generations, it's hundreds of years that things happen to us. Oftentimes, these societies went through changes of borders, there were wars coming and going, there were systems coming and going. We really had very short, if any, experience of democracy in the 20th century. So if you have every 40 years some dramatic systemic change, most of the people don't trust but themselves, and they're a very small environment, which we call like bonding trust. You only trust your brother and sister and mother and your child and no one else. So there is no something like that I trust Slovak is not in the game because I don't know well him enough, even if he's my neighbor, because the historic experience is that I only can count on myself and my family. So this is a very typical thing. So why is this? Because, and also this short-term is, well, I get out as much as possible now. I don't save anything because I don't think whether things will change or not in the future. Probably will change, and I get out, in this story in a very bad way. So this is all somewhat rational action, and I think that people of unstable societies, and all Central Europe is Eastern Central Europe is unstable societies because they are characterized by low level of trust and short-termism, and also the incapability of resilience of political actors who don't play on the basis of values and who are changing social norms, whether they are coming from inside, like now in Hungary or also in Poland, some of the political actors, or they are oppressors and they come from elsewhere. So I think that it's a very good frame, and we understand ourselves much better if we accept that we live in unstable societies, and then in this context we try to understand, okay, so there are psychological responses from people to that. What is the psychological basic response in such a situation? People want some kind of security. So we vote for those who promise the security, who promise that they defend us from some kind of threat. And just think about, Hungary, Orban came to power 2010 because we had a really bad economic crisis after 2008. You did not have that, but PIS got in the midst of the migration crisis. So there were context, a rapid, quickly changing context, which gave a room for those who could say, I'm here, I'm saving you from something, threatening, something unexpected, and we cannot underestimate the problem of the migration. I think it's really very valid in Poland, much more than in Hungary, because you really face these problems. This is existential. Again, it's nothing about salaries or money or work. It is existential. And I think maybe we can come back to that later, because I think this existential threat is in another frame. I would like to discuss this with you, because that, again, tells a lot about how we live today. But maybe I stop at this moment and just pass the floor.
I would like to, first, I had a feeling, Georgi, that they said so many things that easily you would like to comment this, but also if you could also tell us in your perspective, one thing is the history, maybe you can skip if you think this is a stupid question, but also maybe in a history there is something we can see, some similarities, but the most important, I think, is also the Ukrainian perspective. We talk about, security, we talk about trust, we talk about society, and what Ukrainian society showed us in last years is an amazing, like the power to, to work together, to be together, and to really build the trust together in this an amazing crisis. So I'm really curious your perspective on this discussion, also how how the populism is changing, how the societies are changing in Eastern Europe, but also we can have in the same region, like the example of an amazing situation when the societies did something really unusual.
Well, thank you. First of all, well, I don't know where to begin, from the end of your question or to starting from.
You can choose. You can even skip my question.
Okay. So generally, well, what I first puzzled with that was this point that my colleagues sociologists, that they say that that was a kind of stream to speak about the leaders and about persons, etc., and that society was somewhat out of the focus. Well, to me personally, as a historian, that was exactly the opposite scheme. I always looked for, as a historian, I always looked at the societal roots of populism, whatever. This way? Okay.
Because the translators, they're outside and...
sorry. Whatever concept of populism would be, because once again, it's the term itself is very loose. And if you use it loosely, then you can find populists everywhere. Even in the Old Testament, you can find some traces of populism, or in ancient Rome, or in ancient Greece, or whatever. But of course, it will be anachronism, and we speak about the phenomena, which is definitely goes from, let's say, 19th century when the term emerged, but with very different semantic meaning. So, to me, as a scholar, the first sign of importance of something is that the number of reflections on certain phenomena, and I see that that's from the, let's say, middle of 50s to 2010s, the number of scholarly literature which contains term populism grew, well, by the exponent, so that there were about 50 books in the middle of 50s, and in 2010s there were more than 700 books having word populism as a title. However, I still have this sense that it is used, the term used quite loosely. So by different disciplines, by different persons, etc., etc. So, and this is one of the problems, because that's really universal term, which in fact unites very different layers of society and very different actors, political actors. You can find elements of populism everywhere. In the left wing, you can find left-wing populism like Bolsonaro or Medem or whatever. You can find right-wing populism. Well, this country is a very good example for this. So, but from opposite poles of political spectrum, the populism is everywhere. So this is something about attraction. Yes, it's very attractive to everybody. As a political technology, as a kind of element of worldview, as a whatever you can, well, just as a kind of descriptive phenomena. So that number of uses and misuses, of course. So and in this case, as a historian, when I approach this and I trying to catch the essence of this and why it is so popular or why it works, that's a very good point. But I really appreciated this about existential anxiety and about the expectations that someone would protect you, and then you believe these people. So I have two basic observations about the rise of populism from historical point of view. As I see that, first of all, the society changed in many cases, of course, and your division east-west is okay. I could also add another perspective, probably south, global south, and populism in global south, and then the populism, then look at the US where you mentioned unstable societies. Well, the US is a very unstable society, and I lived there, well, quite a good portions of time in different times. At the beginning of the 90s, in the middle and the end of 90s, in the middle of the 2000s, then in the middle of the 2010s, etc. And I saw how the society changed, and it's really changed toward. And it's really societally, and the rise of populism in the United States, in pejorative sense of this word, exactly connected to the rise of the share of poor, of people who have to work at 2-3 jobs to obtain money. So it's socially determined, definitely. So in this case, we see kind of leveling of well-developed golden billion and other countries, and then the populism is the same phenomena in these very different societies. That's one point. That's the growth of number of poors. That's a social aspect. The second aspect is very important. It's cognitive. I think that society in general, and that not I think, it's look at presentations at Davos from year to year about cognitive aspects of social life. So cognitive abilities of people, of majority of people, are downgrading and going down. So I will give you one example. That's let's say about 5 years ago, there was a recommendation for bloggers or vloggers, video bloggers, that your video should be no longer than 15-20 minutes. Then people lose interest and they do not watch and do not listen and do not accept information. Now if you have to catch the audience, your video should not be longer than 1 minute and 1 minute and 30 minutes. This is about cognitive capacities, and this is exactly about populism. Because you have to formulate something that should be consumed very quickly and very effectively. In this case, you should go there and say, just do it. Yeah, that's Nike. Or make America great again. So 5 seconds or 2.
Simple stories, what you just said.
Okay, so that's it. This one, the cognitive, the cognition, the level of cognition and the level of perception. And the level of reflection, it's also going down. And the second part is very important, that how societies changed and why they became more acceptive to populism is, of course, social networking, social networks. We should give a big thank to Mr. Zuckerberg for doing this, and then that he is absolutely directly responsible for the rise of populism, because now social networks exactly the nest for for populism, and it's kind of larva for populism. And then going back to your question about Ukraine, that's, well, the great example are the elections of 2019. Yeah, about 14 million people took part in elections. 75% voted for Zelensky. For utterly populist politician, that was absolute triumph of populism. And he, by the way, he defeated another populist whose populist slogans were less attractive for this society, okay? So, and then, this is the paradox. You ask about why Ukrainian society was so effective in organization of, the resistance. Well, first of all, this resource is expiring already, so definitely. The second part is that exactly Ukrainian society was organized as a society, as a social structures, was organized on horizontal lines, just because this society did not trust vertical lines, like vertical structures of power, et cetera, et cetera. In 2019, according to Gallup, Ukraine was on the last position on the level of trust to government. 9% of Ukrainians trusted government. So that's not about, well, as you see, the state also just demonstrated some kind of capacities, but exactly the horizontal organization of Ukrainian society, which has nothing to do with populism, by the way. So that was a kind of, from some certain point of view, it is a curse for Ukrainian society, because they do not want to penetrate, or they consider state structures, vertical structures, as in terms of 18th, 19th century, as a source of income, mostly. But at the same time, this curse also gives a strength to society, but it has nothing to do with the populism. So well, I just observed, I live here in this country from 21. I observed the last elections. You know that, to me, the symbol of the presence of what we call populism in this case, were the elections this year. There were 3 elections, yeah, okay, to the parliament, to local bodies, and to European parliament.
European Parliament.
Yeah, so 3 kinds of elections. So I have 3 dogs. I just was working with my dogs every day, several times, and then I saw the commercials for politicians. And then there was one person who attracted my attention because she was veterinarian. So she was running elections 3 times, first to Sejm, then to local, and then to European Parliament. That was the same face, with the same slogan, with the same promises, etc., but in 2-3 different bodies. That was a great example, a great sample of populism for me. I see that everything is fine here with the populism. I like it. So you have a lot of job to do. And well, unfortunately, it's not just in Eastern Europe. It's not East European. What I would discuss is that it's not just East European phenomenon. Now it's a global phenomenon, and that's the simple and same phenomenon everywhere. Thank you.
In the second round, I had the feeling that you would like to also comment what others said, so then I will give you a floor to ask the question. But I had a feeling that what repeats in our discussion is trust. I remember we published the magazine Krytyka Polityczna in the title of Trust a few years ago, because we also had the feeling that this is something crucial and really important. And so I'm curious also, how do you see this from this perspective, when trust is really important, but on the other hand we have this politics which used much more simple stories, language, promises, and you just want to trust whomever will gonna promise you anything. This promises, and these are not long-term promises because we do not trust it. What from this perspective, how the next years and also how this political situation can look now. You also mentioned, that intellectuals were much more important. Honest question also for all of us is maybe it's also because we just lost our power. We are not so influential that it was, or we do not understand everything that is happening. And that's why we publish these hundreds of books about populism, because it's like mind-blowing for us.
You're right that the trust is the clue, the key term, the key capital, and we know that in long run, if we would like to, the end with populism at all, we have to rebuild the trust to each other, the trust to public institutions, the trust to the state. Rebuild this bridging social capital, not this bonding with people from your family, but this bridging, with other citizens. Okay, we know it, but how to do it? To rebuild the trust, the social capital, you have to start with rebuilding the institutions. All those institutions that were dismantling during the time of law and justice in power. The judiciary system, the education, actually every institution, and constitution as well, and so all this check and balances mechanism, etc. Okay, so we have to rebuild the institution, but to have a chance to rebuild the institution, to rebuild the trust, you have to win the election. And how to win the election when you have to compete with populists? It's very difficult to compete with populists because they are lowering the standard of public debate. They choose these simpler stories. Ralph Dahlendorf said that liberal democracy is complex when the populism is simple, and that's the. To fight the populists, you have to become the populists. And that's what happened in Poland. This election, parliamentary election of October 15, it was not the end of populism in Poland. Actually, our society
changing from one populism to another populism.
Yeah, we changed the right-wing populists with maybe not liberal populists because it's more, but maybe center-oriented populism. And Donald Tusk had to put on the mask of populism on his face. The civic platform, the democratic opposition, had to do it, and and society didn't reject the populistic language because the democratic opposition also used the elements of populistic narratives about the refugees, etc. Maybe they didn't scaremonger against them, but they used the same elements. They used the hate speech against the political opponents, and they were able to win the election. But it's only, they win the battle, not the war. And that's something that maybe is not understood in Europe. When I visited some European capitals just after the European election. I was in Berlin, then Brussels, then Paris. Well, everybody said that Poland is, bright spot of European Union. Well, come on, we are a bright spot of European Union. Our democratic opposition were able to win the election. I mean, they were able to take power. But the Law and Justice was the party who won the election. I mean, after 8 years of the Law and Justice, with this political style consisting of violating constitution, violating the minority rights, dismantling the democratic institution, spreading nepotism and political corruption. After 8 years, they still are one of the strongest parties in Poland. And the democratic parties became populist, and they used the same language. I mean, in a few months we'll get the presidential election, and then we will see. I mean, if we were able to start this march toward the liberal democracy, this rebuilding institution and trust agenda, or we will populist society forever.
Is it I wanted to give you the microphone at the end. Is it okay? Then.
Okay.
I wanted to ask, like, our guests. Yeah. Zsuzsa, your comment and
lots of super interesting things. Maybe one thing I would like to say here is that we also misunderstand these populists, because it's the fact is that they actually have a lot of positive thing to tell to the people. And there are wonderful research at CEU by one of my colleagues who call it like positive authoritarianism. Well, what do they say? What do they offer, right? So they make America great again, or make Poland great again, make Hungary great again. Why? We have this in every country, right? This is not without reason. It is so efficient, because it is offering a pride for you. Now, it's pride and optimism, which also it's projected by this term, is super important when there are insecurity around us. And when the identities, personal and group identities, are actually shaken. Like, what can I do when the world goes mad, right? We all know this. It's very frightening. It's a threatening word out there. And then there is someone who is telling you, and not just, simple stories are never really simple. They are actually sometimes very, very good, shortened version, essence of something broader and more complicated. So there is a whole story behind, like Make Poland Great Again. And this is providing a very strong, positive feeling for a lot of people who feel insecure, who are feeling that their identity is shaken, and maybe that's not national identity which is shaken, it's very personal. But through the national identity, leaders can provide some kind of security, some kind of control. And I would like, again, to use this psychological need. What really humans we all need is some kind of control over our own life. This is really the most important things what we want to control. And if someone is telling that we make us great again, that means that then we are someone. Of course, the problem with this is that it is against someone else, right? It comes together with xenophobia and nativism, nationalism. So we can be proud of ourselves because we believe that we are better than those others. And this is it's of course very problematic, but what I am saying is that it has some kind of positive message, and this is very important also to recognize. So when we are looking for alternatives, then we also have to figure out, we cannot only talk about the end of the world with the climate change, because that's nothing comforting. What the hell can anyone do with the climate change if we do not offer something at the same time? And this is where my issue is. We do not have this new and alternative grand narrative. Of course, I find it very problematic, as you raised the issue that the current Polish government are actually using same style and same narrative. Also, we know from many research that kind of lighter version of the same narrative, like on migration, that does not really help. Because, if there is a strong narrative, and this is get everyone out, then you say, oh, I also believe most people should be out, but not everyone. I mean, that doesn't sound very good and convincing. So what is then the alternative story? We cannot say, let's get everyone in, because that's very frightening. So, and this is where I want to go with the role of intellectuals. So I actually do believe there is a lot of role for intellectuals in these days, because when there are so many insecure things, there are lots of changes, then we have to understand what is happening around us in order to provide some kind of alternative, some kind of stories, some kind of true future to let's say to the politicians. And I think research is incredibly important. Narrative building. As I said earlier, a real good, simple slogan is the result of lots of research and lots of intellectual investment, of linguistic investment, and psychological investment. So what people actually need. So how do I formulate my knowledge into a slogan? And marketing specialists do know how to do this, and politics is a market. So there is a lot by intellectuals. We just have to speak in a different language, because no one understands what we are talking about if we do not understand ourselves, because we are also psychological beings, and we also have the same. And I think it's very useful sometimes to think of ourselves. I mean, I don't know, I do have sometimes bad mornings when I get up and I say, oh my God, what the world I'm living in, what the hell I'm doing, how am I coping with this? So what we have to offer, if we want to change, or if we want to influence society, we should think about the coping mechanism. And this is also always psychological. And I think that's where we have to move around. And yeah, I wonder whether you have an alternative story to the story of Kaczynski and PIS, which is like the Orban story, right? The world is super dangerous. There are bad people, but we are the good people here. We are going to help you. We make you great again, because history is important, because you can always go back some kind of positive momentum. Everyone has positive stories in history. Maybe it was 20 years ago, maybe it was 500 years ago. The most funny things when in Hungary, we go back to the establishment of the Hungarian state 1,000 years ago. So the best Hungarian story was 1,000 years ago, and Orban can still build on this wonderful past of Hungarian 1,000 years ago. I'm pretty sure the Ukrainians also have their wonderful momentum. So that's make Poland great again, this kind of very vague reference to some kind of wonderful old great momentum. It works everywhere in the world, because everyone always had something good. And it's very, very relative. So we also have to find what were the great momentum in our history which represented something we want to achieve now. Let's say in Hungarian story, when we lived still in a multicultural society, because Hungary, most until 1920, was actually a multicultural society, but we did not treat it those minorities very well, so we have to recalculate, but we had an experience. Well, anyway, history is great, and I think it's another thing to understand ourselves, so it's not only our psyche, human psyche, and our political institutional system, which we most probably have to reconstruct a little bit. So at least in Hungary, ours is destroyed, right? We have to start from scratch. No one believes anything in any institutions in Hungary any longer, because the values, the norms are not presented by the democratic institutions, but Viktor Orbán. So we have to rebuild them from scratch. Maybe you don't need to rebuild from scratch, but you really have to invest to give some weight to the institutions, because we, in Eastern European unstable societies, we are not very institutionalist, and our institutions are weak. Under certain difficulties, they can really lose their identity and go after the strong man. So there's a lot to do, and the alternative story is what we have to find.
I like that narration. On the other hand, I think that the populists that very often use the alternative stories, and some of them are like fake stories just with the nice flowers, and that's why this is the story of like make us great again, but honestly, like we were not so great. So
It is a story.
yeah, but based on not, but I'm not a historian. We have a scholar here.
Yeah, just it's made us great again and again and again. Yeah, okay, so it's endless story. But make Poland safe again, make Poland rich again, whatever. But it's interesting point intriguing point about the intellectuals or intelligentsia. So that's I think that intelligentsia is dead. So that's there are intellectuals after intelligentsia is dead. So now there are intellectuals, and the intellectuals probably are already ready to go. The general point is that populism is absolute opposition to intellectuals, absolute opposition, because intellectuals is something about critical thinking. But probably now your publishing house should republish the book published in 1926, written by Julien Bendin.
We published it.
Yeah? Okay, super. So that's time. That's exactly trahison des clercs. Yeah? The treason of intellectuals. That's exactly about our times. Because intellectuals, so probably we believe that we are intellectuals. Probably we are, I don't know. Probably it's self-deception that we believe that we're intellectuals. But now we see the large-scale trahison des clercs. Again, so treason of intellectuals. Intellectuals go to serve right-wing politicians, nationalists, ethnic nationalists, populists, etc. I look at Ukrainian intellectuals, big names, what they do now. It's total hate speech. It's total division of society, just looking the search for other inside society and the elimination of this other by any means, including repressions, etc. I understand that Ukraine now in the state of the war, and that's that's kind of to a great extent conducive, but it started before the war. And I see the same. When I came to Poland in September 21, I just commissioned the internet to the room to the mieszkanie where I just settled in, and then I was in my study room, and the guy who arranged the TV set just was working there, and then immediately at some point he switched on the TV, And then it was TVP1, something like this, in 21. And then what I heard was so much familiar to me. It was complete cry. There were three people there on the screen, and they were crying on each other. Just they were from different political forces. They were ready to kill each other. So that was the familiarization with very familiar thing. That's definitely the same in Ukraine. And these people belong to what can be called intellectuals. Of course, I can admit that, for instance, in academic culture here in Poland, there is a lot of high-quality research and high-quality specialists who can withstand this, that they can analyze, they can deconstruct these discourses, they can present them, et cetera, et cetera. The problem is that I'm not sure that society wants them. That's the great gap. And in this case, intellectuals look like Randall McMurphy. You know, that's One Flew Over Cuckoo's Nest. Randall McMurphy, the person who was in the Met House and tried to opposite the Ordnung in this Met House. And that's classical story. If you don't know this story, it means that it's really I'm living in other time. So just I'm outdated. But it is exactly when he tried to take a huge device and throw it to the window and to break the window and to go to reach freedom, then he lost. And then they started to mock him, and then he said, at least I tried. So that's the role of intellectuals now. So intellectuals should at least try. First, stop to invest into the hate speech and the divisions in society. And the second, to deconstruct populist discourses with everything, with irony, with the analysis, whatever, and try to convey this to broader audiences. Unfortunately, in this case, that's paradoxically, intellectuals should go to the field of populism. And they should become, to a certain extent, should exercise populist methods. Probably popularizing methods, not populist. Yeah?
The book you mentioned is not very optimistic for us.
No, generally, well, that's exactly that. The guy, the Randall McMurphy, just died in the delirium. So, well, but we all die sooner or later. So that's let's try to at least to do something. Yeah, that's not very much optimistic, but at least inspiring to a certain extent. Yeah, thank you.
Can I disagree now? Because so several remarks, beginning with what you said before, Grigori, because we are discussing the main typical thesis about genealogy of populism, which usually is like economic one, neoliberalism caused inequalities, inequalities caused social anger, so people decided to vote for anti-establishment party, and then what you get is populism. The problem is that usually when you look at the numbers of the parties that collapsed in struggles with populism, usually the numbers are very good. Civic Platform had the largest accumulated growth in entire OECD, 25% through 8 years. They decreased the deficit from 8% to 3%, unemployment from almost 20% to a few percent. And then they collapsed totally. When you look at the numbers of Biden actually is leaving the office with one of the best results of economy that you can imagine, like 3.5% of growth, minimum unemployment, skyrocketing shares on the stock market. Pretty much everything works there, much, much better than the EU. You know, if Draghi publishes a report that the EU is in a huge crisis because in comparison to the productivity level, to the innovation level in the States, and of course China as well, then the EU is just fucked up, all right? And then you lose elections with populism. So I reject economic thesis. Of course, partly it can be right, but for sure it doesn't explain everything. Then comes another one, which is history, right? In America, you have history of racism, in Poland, history of nationalism, anti-Semitism. But the problem is that if you have, and you always had something, So if something is didn't change, how you want to explain change with that? So this one I reject as well. And then comes the technological thesis that, you know, people have algorithms polarize people. It's all of it is true. But if you look who votes for PiS or even Fidesz, older people, do they really are this like nerds sitting with computers and like fighting with each other? That's usually the people who don't vote do it much more often than the people who vote. So I mean, this is why we decided to go more deeply into the soft phenomena, because soft phenomena you won't get in TV. They are usually not discussed. You know, the trust that we all agree is a huge problem wouldn't be a good topic for the news channel, because it's something that it's not visible. It's also something that is very hard to imagine how to change it, etc. And then comes the remark, because I fully agree with Jucha, you call it existential. I would call it like, okay, we can call it existential. But as a psychologist, you absolutely correctly mentioned the fact that Poland, along with Hungary, are two extremely traumatized societies. Wars, uprisings, no state, Trianon, etc., etc. If you are traumatized, the first thing which you want to do is not to lose your minimum of security. Like what you want first is security. You don't want to risk. Traumatized people don't take a risk. This is actually why many women don't even go to the police when they were raped, right? Because I mean, of course, it's comparison. I mean, there are social phenomena, individual phenomena, but still, like trauma usually leads you to secure what you have, even if it's not a lot. So this is the one thing, and then comes intelligentsia. Intelligentsia and intellectuals are completely two different phenomena. You could be the part of intelligentsia being a student expelled from the university because of you were fighting with communists or Tsarat or whatever, and you couldn't be a part of intelligentsia being a professor cooperating with Tsarat or cooperating with communism. Intelligentsia is a phenomenon from mid-19th century that actually is defined by mission, by certain ethos, not by education. And of course, what we are with Przemek calling for in the book, and we were absolutely on purpose avoiding using of word elections, because we wanted to, like, we didn't want people to think that in one day, October 15th, we became non-populist society. It's bullshit, of course, and actually the research that we published a year after completely confirmed our thesis that we are still the same society. What happened a year ago was an uprising, something very exceptional, one-day thing, right? And the same two groups that made the difference, young voters and women, were immediately the first groups that became, again, demotivated to vote and to identify with the government. No surprise with that. This is why we are distinguishing three stages. One is political change. That is, of course, necessary and important, but it's just a one stage. It's one step. Then the second one must be institutional change, and of course, this is what is happening, much harder, by the way, like, you know, the recovery of rule of law, etc., etc. And then comes something that we defined as the condition sine qua non of opposing populism or even overcoming populism, which is mental change, cultural change. And here, I can't imagine any serious cultural breakthrough without intelligentsia. If somebody can build a trust or the islands of trust, is exactly the intelligentsia people. This is what happens with dissidents. If you look at the manifesto of Havel, The Power of Powerless, it was exactly about the atomization and distrust and the fear And this is, you know, why all people from mid-19th century who were like in Russia, in Germany, in Jewish diaspora, not in Germany, in Ukraine, in Poland, in Jewish diaspora, what they were doing, they were gathering usually around magazines, by the way, and they were creating huge social capital inside, and as a kind of electricity or a kind of a Kraftwerk, kind of a, so like a plant, they were trying to distribute the social glue among people. When the Defense Workers' Committee, organized by Kuro and Michnik, when they were going to factories and trying to find workers, first what they were doing is like to get trust from them, and then to build the trust between different social groups and with workers, and then to show, to prove, to give a test, to testify that it makes sense to trust other people. So communists cannot atomize you anymore in factories, also on the cultural field, etc., etc. So, like to sum up, I mean, I believe that we have to fight for these two things, like to make political liberalism not only on paper, because even in Stalinist constitution, there were fully respected checks and balances. But if you don't have it in your heart, in your soul, like Havel used to say, we need a revolution of hearts and souls. Then we can, you know, I mean, walk around the parliament with the constitution. But if people will not stand for that firmly, in a determined way, massively, then forget about democracy. And if something can cause this change, are exactly intelligentsia project, people, institutions, groups, formal, informal, doesn't matter. But this vehicle is for sure not that, and it's necessary for the future. Thank you.
May I
Yeah.
just two brief comments. I just was not going to comment everything you said. I agree with many points you've done, but I just would like to comment 2 points to make kind of more nuanced understanding of them. First of all, you are absolutely right when you provide data about the macro economics, and that it contradicts the thesis about the poor countries, etc. But we should look at, we rather should look not at the macroeconomics, but probably we should look at socioeconomic, because stock markets, the GDP, etc. Sometimes, in many times, it has nothing in common with a certain social layers. For instance, this iron belt, which is now, that's in decay in the U.S., and regnects, and that's also a objective statistics that people in the U.S. So there is a poorness, the term poorness of workers, of working people. So 20 years, 30 years ago, if you work, you have a certain social level. Now, if you work, you may be poor. And then that's exactly the good environment for populism. And Trump always use it. So rednecks, all these old industrial zones which just decayed. So this is exactly about the poor. So if we speak about the victory of populism in rich country, we should go to a more nuanced approach, particularly to social aspects, because you know that a certain, including the number of those who voted, including, by the way, including the type of electoral system. So you know that when Trump won first time, there was a lot of people who were saying that we should make constitution and should change the electoral system, which is really idiotic to a great extent. So that time, 2 million people, the rival of Trump got 2 million people votes more, but then he won. Well, here in Poland, the PiS got more votes than their rivals, but lost. So that's also something. So, and the second point about the voters. Exactly. These layers of society who are in, well, let's say, middle. You made eight groups, yeah, in your book, focus groups from different layers of society. So.
Well, as for layers, we usually do three typical.
Three.
Well, you know, popular
then
class, high class, middle class, but of course we divide people along. We break it down along constituencies. Like
I'm finishing, so I understand that I take too much time. It's okay, but just one small that this point about that's old people, outdated people, that they are voting and they provide a. Of course they do, but that's the last elections in Ukraine. 12 million people didn't vote, and that was probably the most active part of society. So that's true. But again, going back to this point, they are the poorest part of society, and that's again something about social dimensions of this. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. It's really interesting. I recommend to our audience the two books which we publish. One is Arlie Hochschild. It's a stranger in own country, obcy we własnym kraju. It's about U.S. and this, and the other is of course the report from Miastko. This is also about that.
there's one more, written by Thomas Frank. What's the matter with Kansas? Yeah. Which was published 20 years ago. We published it 15 years ago. This was one of the first books that actually really well described all the processes that got into conclusion with what is going on in the States now. But the book is like amazingly written, pretty much funny or ironic, and very based on critical thinking, also not about the people, but about the elites as well. So this is not easy to find, but you can probably find it in Allegro. I don't want this book to be forgotten. This is why I'm mentioning this. Yeah,
of course, we sold out this years ago. If you have any question, I will give you the mic.
Let's get it.
Yeah. There are two questions, and we collect them, and then you can answer.
Hello. I must say, of course, I probably am not the only one who's getting pessimist the last time. And it's not so much about that I don't believe on the possibilities of using popularizing methods to deconstruct populists, but it's more about the change. I perceive a big change in the way information is spread. And maybe I'm simplifying, but I thought we come from a time when there were filters, institutions, newspapers, etc., authorities that kind of filtered information, and now we ended up in Elon Musk telling everyone that we are the media. So two questions. Is first, am I right about this maybe idealized world which we come from the filters towards no filters at all? And if that's true, that's more or less reality, is there hope in the world of post-truth?
Thank you.
Hello, that's quite unfortunate because I have three questions actually that I can stick with. Okay. First of all, there's one thing I want to touch on, which is the question of how can we be cool? What I mean by that is that liberalism used to be very populist in like 1848 or something, and right now, how can we like have this populist language when we are those who like stand by scientific institutions, democratic institutions? When what is winning is the contrarian narrative, like election was stolen or vaccines cause outings, whatever. How can we like still like if we are defending those institutions, how can we like be popular, cool, and so on? Second question I have is about side of population which wasn't discussed here, which is conspiracy theories, because I have a feeling that Poland was sort of was a first country which like made the whole political party like engaged in conspiracy theory, and it is something which happened in the U.S. also. Like in the U.S., the conspiracy theory is like, if you are a Republican, you have to believe that 2020 election was stolen. You cannot say otherwise. And similar in Poland, if you are in peace, you have to say that Smolensk was was orchestrated by some malicious forces, and you also cannot contradict it if you are in peace. So how can we stand against statements which are blatantly, shamelessly false, and still be like, still be cool and nice?
One more short question.
Very short question. Don't you think that the populism is going to stay with us? And I have a economical theory to that, right? I mean, with the shrinking middle class, actually what's happening in the US or in England, right? I mean, the people are fighting for the survival. They have 2-3 jobs, right? So populism is kind of defending itself. If it's not going to work with this party, I mean, there's going to be another party coming with the fairly easy quotes, right? And then the next election, they're going to change. But I would really base my theory in line with Georgi, right, on the socio-economical relations of the problem.
Okay.
Okay, so my question is, what is the role in this in populism now, the wiping out of any alternative to capitalism? And the second one, the backlash to the feminist movement, because this imagined past that everybody wants to go back to is very conservative. And the same earlier, what I said, that everybody, well, yeah, that's all.
Okay, and the last one.
First of all, thank you very much for actually interesting discussion. And my name is Volodymyr. I would like to ask, how can we consider the effect of raising up of populist parties? Is it a victory of those parties, or it is some kind of defeat of traditional, conventional parties' political system? And if it's the second option, the defeat, how can we repair the system if it's deeply sick? Thank you.
Because I have the worst memory here among us, so I'll pick the mic and pick two questions if possible. So one was about conspiracy theories, well, or like why people so easily accept like Smolensk narration or the stolen elections in America. It's smart people, educated people, people that you would never ever think that they can really buy this shit, right? So, well, this is why this postmodern turn is so important, because you look, why we have this notion fake news. I mean, politicians always lied. There was always propaganda. There was always a problem with that, right? So why do we need new notion for that? It's because before there was certain common sanction, religion, science, charge, I mean, moral authorities, etc., etc. But today, with this so decentralized truth, or the truth that purely is just a concept of the concept that gets social majority, and nothing that would refer to something that really unites us, then there is nothing that can stop me of saying that what you're saying is a fake news. And there is nothing that can distinguish it. Of course, you have fact-checking portals, but the influence is zero. And usually these fact-checking portals or news very quickly became identity media. That what happened to Okopress, or that what's happened in CNN. So, I mean, if we don't share anything, there will never be pure facts or facts that we can accept commonly, that it's a fact, right? So this is why it became kind of a code. It became like people who are supporting these conspiracy theories, they have distance to it. They're fully aware. Like Kaczynski is aware what happened in Smolensk. Maybe Kaczynski got crazy, but if it's not Kaczynski, then there is an army of people that are using this conspiracy theory, and for sure they don't believe it, or it's irrelevant whether they believe it or not. It's a code that it's a very useful tool for politics. Same in the States. And if nobody can check it, nobody can verify it, because the God is dead, socialism is dead, Foucault is dead, Nietzsche is dead, science is dead, there is nothing that unites us anymore. So, like, anything goes, pretty much, when it comes to discourse. Then there was this second question from the lady sitting there. So, I mean, I think that you may think that I'm just repeating the kind of a banal truth. But I think that up to now, this banal truth about the gender gap and gender struggle in the world, I think it's becoming the problem number one. What I see in the States, what I see in Poland, what I see pretty much everywhere, it's a really global war between males that are losing position, are worse educated, are frustrated, are pretty much powerless, because they usually stay in their towns, they cannot find a partner, because usually female partners are better educated, migrating, I mean, cannot be satisfied with what men can offer you pretty much today. This is why this gap between metro America and non-metro America, like metropolitan America and provincial America, is so huge. Trump is it's a pure epiphany of this kind of male's frustration that males are losing position today. Same shit in Poland, same shit pretty much everywhere. Where it's gonna lead us, don't know, because I don't see any mechanism that would reverse or that would make it, I don't know, that would make this gap smaller, make this struggle more civilized. I think that there is a topic that is on the table. People are publishing surveys that young women prefer black protest, young males prefer national march or national movement or whatever. So it is touched. It is like people know that it's going on. But what we don't know is the scale. What we are not aware that the scale is growing fastly. And third thing, we don't know what to do with that. And actually, I cannot say that I read a lot, or I can find a lot about what to do with it. And I think we are not in the late stage of it. I think this process is rising. Okay, when it's gonna lead us, I don't know. But to me, along with the conflict between Russia and the West, along the conflict between China and the West, we have a global conflict that has a lot in common with populism. That it's feminist revolution that finally happened, which is good, but males can make it shit, and they're doing it pretty much in Poland, in the States.
Thank you. Fascinating questions. Just a few comments. The shrinking middle class or middle class, I think what is important here is not what actually the absolute numbers say, but how people perceive. And politics is always about how people perceive the problems and what do they think their perspective in the future. Politics is always about the future. It's very important to know, even when we use historic analogs, it is about telling something about how the future will make again, right? So it's always about the future. It's always about some kind of perspective. It's all about promise. And when people feel, and this is where we are globally now, in the Western world, and in this sense, we are part of the West, that the perspective of the future is very unclear. And a lot of people who felt secure existentially for long, they don't see this kind of future security enough. Whether this is really true for them or not, it's a kind of feeling. It's completely subjective. And of course, there can be political forces to create this insecurity and make emphasis on it further. But the perception of the problems is what. And this is why, for example, inequality is completely, if you think about political terms, this is completely, well, I think probably it's my phone. So it's very subjective. So in a lot of countries where there's real big inequality, people don't find it as a problem at all. In Hungary, where the Gini index is actually quite small, Hungarians believe it's a very unequal society. It's not true, but many people feel so. They probably misuse the term. They feel it's unjust in one way or another. But basically, I just wanted to illustrate how subjective things are. And of course, when we research this and when we speak in this scientific language, we always have to see how it's present. If you think in political terms, you always have to be able to tell it in a way that people can get a proper frame for it. But what I really would like to comment is about liberalism and how are we? I don't know whether there was a successful liberal party in Poland in the last 30 years. Were there any? Were there any party which called themselves liberal? Yeah, yes. There are many, but they did not.
Many, but they never defined what they understand by liberalism, and usually implicitly meant economic liberalism.
Yeah, we basically are pretty bad in terms of liberalism. So when we are talking about liberal democracy, most people have no idea what it is. Actually, people do not even know what democracy is. There was a recent research about all European countries, not only us, Europeans, what democracy is, and people define democracy by their own words. So they said, I have work. Democracy is when I have work. Democracy is when there is no war. So if there is no war, what Orban says, then there is democracy. So people say, when I have security, I have a proper living standard, that is democracy. Only 15 people of all Europeans said that freedom has any relationship to democracy or liberal democracy. So it's really, we are not so good in defining the word where we live and actually where we want to go. Another very confusing thing, and this is something really unfortunate in our case, which we now see looking backward. So in 1989, our big freedom revolution, if we look back what was the state of the post-war world, then we can see that the 1990s, the big freedom, the wild freedom in our countries, this was actually the time when the globalization reached this over-globalized state of the world, when neoliberalism, the big money started to move all around the world. So basically, what we learned in Eastern Europe as liberalism was already neoliberalism with all its negative consequences. And of course, a lot of people identify liberalism to that. When there is huge, few people gather incredible lot of money, a lot of people cannot find job. Eastern Europe, the economy collapses, factories close, deconstruction of a lot of things. I mean, you know very well how the 90s looked in Poland or in Hungary or in our countries. So we were, in this sense, we were really unlucky. But we also have to be able to cope with being unlucky. But liberalism is complicated. And if you think about many other research about what people see good politics, for example, most people in Eastern Europe believe that if there is debate and then political parties, too many, they quarrel all the time, they just can't bear this. This is another thing, that the multi-party nature of democracy is a complication. It's complicated for Eastern Europeans. People just don't comprehend and definitely don't like if people express different opinions, different interests. They like if parties are in peace with themselves, right? This is really not what democracy can offer. So we are difficult with. And then the last thing I'd like to say, which we didn't touch, but I think it's very important, that we live in a counter-revolution. So all those, let's call them populist or autocrats or new autocrats or radical right, they frame themselves as anti-revolutionaries against the progressives, against the 1960s and 70s, against the freedom, the unnatural freedom, which basically defined the Western worlds until recently. And this is a very strong ideology. And when Orban's think tanks organized the CPAC, this Radical Right American Action Conference, which is the Trumpist wing of the US Republicans, come to Hungary now every year. There were already 3 conferences like this, and they gather all these right-wingers from all over the world. The slogan they say is that no war, no gender, no woke, no migration. And I think these are very short, very much to the point, and they refer to all those existential threats which the Westerners in these days somehow feel, and then the radical right parties can play on that. So no war is there since Ukraine war. Obviously, people want to live in peace, right? No war means what? But what is that? What does this mean in reality? Does it mean that we let Putin to win? Very, very problematic. But it's a very strong political argument, no war, because no one wants war. No woke. This is almost funny in our countries because there is no big, large woke movement in Eastern Europe, but people do understand what it is. It's, for me, it's like decency, right? It's kind of too intellectual, too fine. Let's talk as we like, we are just Hungarians, we are Polish, we like to sit in a pub and beer, and why don't this, this kind of picky intellectual thing, let's be who we are. It's actually no woke, it is what it means. And of course, this is something like a lot of people can identify with. I just want to be myself. So no woke and all kind of PCs in this thing. No migration is, we talked about a bit, it's no any other than us. And it's very important, very existential. There is a massive threat in the world because migration is growing, and it changed its face because there was always migration in the world, but typically people similar to us, I mean, in Hungary was populated after each war over hundreds of years, so the Slovaks came, the Germans came, whoever came, you know, again, a lot of this, but these were mainly people, 200 kilometers from you. These were the people who were coming to us, and of course, could integrate very well. Today, it's really very different, and a lot of people, it is just people come too far away. So it's also a very, very strong argument. And we have to think about how people feel. I can tell you when I went to, in 2015, the first zone of migrants in the Hungarian-Serbian border, because I was a parliamentarian, so I could go in. It was quite shocking. There was lots of people from the Middle East. So I had to think about what people might think when they see such a mess. Long. We do. Oh, okay. Maybe the gender I wanted to speak about, but you said very well. There is a relevant, real threat about this, that women go too far, that people with unnatural identities get too far. So it's also existential. This is what basically I wanted to. These are all existential, and those radical right movements go with this general pro-natural whatever.
Zsuzsa, you took all of the questions, and
okay.
So they can only answer.
It's
Sure.
7 p.m. It means that we are talking like 2 hours, so very, very shortly. There were questions about the hope in this time of post-truth, how to repair the system. Well, I'm optimistic. I see that more and more people around me, not only students, I mean people that I met during field works, focus group interviews, etc. They're more and more interested in good quality information. They're looking for it. They prefer the even difficult information, but with quality. So what we need is to to support this need and to support the media. I mean, well, we are able to vote out law and justice, but use the public money to support the not governmental organization, not only public media, all good quality media. Let's start the project of building the liberal society in this this sphere of social organization, because that's the future, and that's something. I mean, we are not able to defeat populism using only political weapons.
Thank you. Well, I just be very short. I just will finish with the populist slogan, "Make truth great again," and that will be my final point. Thank you.
Thank you, Georgi, Kasyanov, Przemysław Sadura, Szelényi, and Sławomir Sierakowski. My name is Agnieszka Wiśniewska. Thank you for spending this Friday evening with us. And thank you very much for translators.
Dziękujemy bardzo.
Dzięki.